Dear respected Thai, dear beloved community, today is the 22nd of November. We are in the Assembly of Stars Meditation Hall in the Lower Hamlet in our 3-month autumn retreat. We all have suffering. We've all experienced difficulties, painful experiences. Life has left its trace in our bodies and minds. Perhaps we carry the pain not only of this life but of our ancestors, our families, our people, our nations, and even the earth. We can feel the wounds of Mother Earth in our own consciousness, in our own bodies. So let us bring all of our wounds, all of the knocks and bumps and scrapes, let us bring them here today to be soothed, to be embraced, to be accompanied by our gentle breath. Let us bring all of our pain into the warmth of the Sangha embrace. Perhaps sitting here together as a Sangha body, we can embrace parts of ourselves, parts of our experience, parts of our hurt that we have not yet been able to embrace. There is power in the collective. The collective energy of the Sangha is very, very strong. So this talk is not really a talk. I hope that together we can experience it as a kind of guided meditation, and whatever I say, it's just as much for me as for anybody else. It's all work in progress. So we just do our best together, and we support each other with our quality of awareness, with our presence, with our breathing, with our love. I've been asked to speak about a sutra. I don't know if you know or not. If anybody told you what the topic is, there's a topic. is called the Sutra on the Better Way to Live Alone. And the title is a little bit confusing. It confused me for a long time. But before I speak about the sutra, I want to talk about time travel. I like science fiction, so I like talking about time travel. I think in the 1980s, neuroscientists they got very excited about a machine called a PET scanner, positron electron tomography. It's a machine that can measure the blood flow in the brain, and it can localize the blood flow in the brain in 3 dimensions. It's a way to see what's happening in real time in our brains. So the scientists thought, well, maybe with this machine we can find out which part of the brain is responsible for what kind of activity. Find out what's really going on inside this box, black box. So they asked people to do a certain task. So in this case, they had to remember a list of words, and then they would go inside the machine, and they have to try to remember as many words as they could. And the scientists hoped that they would be able to localize which part of the brain is responsible for recollecting these words. And they were a little bit disappointed when they saw actually when the participants in the study are trying to remember these words, there's many different parts of the brain which are all doing things. So they couldn't really tell which part is responsible for remembering this list. So they thought, okay, we need to do a control. So if you're familiar with scientific terminology, it means you try to establish a baseline. You try to establish a kind of neutral condition with which you can compare, so you can compare to your study. So they asked people to go inside the scanner and do nothing. Don't think. Just rest. And they thought, we can establish what the brain looks like when it's doing nothing. And then we can kind of subtract that from what we see when the brain is supposed to be remembering this list. And then we'll know which part is just remembering the list. And they were very disappointed. Because it turns out that when you ask somebody to do nothing and you put them in the scanner, their brain actually becomes more active than before. And maybe you know that from sitting on the cushion. Sometimes the bell is invited, and we may have the idea that in meditation we're supposed to stop thinking or think less, and suddenly it seems like it just becomes even more. So the scientists were not very happy, and their study didn't work, and they called it a confound, which is, it means it's kind of noise in the data. There's something wrong. It's not normal, and you have to get rid of it. So they kind of struggled with that for a while, until a few years later, a PhD student She's called Nancy Andreasen. I don't know how to pronounce it. Andreasen, I think. Nancy Andreasen. She, based on, to some extent, her own self-reflection, she thought, well, it's silly to call it the rest state. I know when I lie down on a couch and I try to do nothing, my mind just, it starts, there's a lot of activity. So these scientists, they're not very realistic. Maybe we should really think about what does it mean when we're sort of in, the brain is idling. It's not doing anything, not doing a specific task. And she decided to do a study, and the object of the study was this so-called rest state. So she asked people to go in the scanner and do nothing. And then when they came out, she asked them what happened. So to report, what is their experience. And they all said that when they were lying there, they started daydreaming. And their mind would imagine something in the future, maybe something they had to do in the next few days. And then from there it would jump to the past, remembering something that happened a few days before. And it would zip back and forth between past and future effortlessly. No special effort required. And we all know, I think, how that goes. So the mind is a time traveler. We can zip back and forth between past and future very easily, without making any effort at all. And so then scientists became very interested in this phenomenon, and they gave it a new name. They like giving things names. And now it's called, or the part of the brain that lights up when we're supposed to be doing nothing, is now called the default mode network. So it's the default. It's when you're not doing anything, that's what happens. And sometimes it's called the default mode. And sometimes we call it the DMN, default mode network. And there are now thousands of studies on the default mode network. And the scientists have become so excited about it that many of them now characterize this capacity that we have of time travel as being unique to humans. So they say, this is our special ability. This is what distinguishes us from all other animals. Now, if you're at all familiar with primate studies or animal intelligence studies, you'll know very well that it's not the first time that we tried to find something which makes us special, makes us different from all the other animals. And usually what happens is that after a while, an animal shows up which does the same thing. So we're not that special. And we've tried all kinds of things. Is it tool making? No. Animals also make tools, lots of them. Is it language? Probably not. Is it our ability to work as a team, collectively? Not really. Is it the default mode network? Time travel? Maybe. Maybe not. So we'll see. But for the moment, they say that human beings are the only species that can do this. It's actually already a question of degree. So we already know that there's some animals that plan for the future that we know that there's crows, there's a kind of Caledonian crow. You can give it very complicated puzzles that depend on an ability to think ahead about a whole sequence of activities, and we already know that they can do it very well. So the scientists are saying, well, yes, but they don't do it as much as we do. And maybe they can't imagine as far forward and as far back. So anyway, this is our very special ability. And maybe it's what allows us to learn from our past experience. So we can look back and see what happened. Did it work? Did it not work? And maybe we can imagine doing something similar but a little bit different in the future. And it's kind of like a laboratory. We can experiment ahead of time. It also means that we can coordinate. We couldn't imagine organizing a day of mindfulness like this, right, unless we could plan for the future. So we can let everybody know, okay, next week on Thursday, we will all get together and sit in the lower hamlet. That depends on our default mode network. We wouldn't be able to make plans like that if we didn't have this capacity. Maybe we wouldn't be able to plant vegetables. All of agriculture depends on this capacity to see, well, in the past when I planted that kind of seed, after a few weeks, something popped up. What if I do that again? Maybe the same thing will happen. So the happy farmers are very good at using their default mode network. And so there's nothing wrong with it necessarily, right? It's not a bad thing. But it's very interesting. There was a recent article in the New York Times. Somebody sent me a link. It was all about the default mode network. And in the article they gave an example of how quickly we can go back and forwards in time. And it's got a nice example, so I just repeat it here. So imagine that you go, you walk your dog on a familiar route, and this could be, or maybe you drive your car to work and it's the same route, so you don't have to think too much about it. And we all know as soon as we do that, a familiar activity, our brain may have the tendency to start wandering. So in this example they say, well, I take my dog for a walk and then I start thinking about the meeting I have next week with my boss and my team at work. And there's a kind of thrill of anticipation. Like, I hope that meeting's going to go well. I'm going to give a good presentation. And maybe if I give a good presentation, maybe later I can talk to my boss and negotiate, maybe get a raise. If he's impressed, he likes what I've done. And then if I get a raise, well, maybe I could talk to my partner and we could think about moving to that area we've always wanted to move to, and we get a bigger house, and maybe the kids can go to a better school, and wow, wouldn't that be great? And then suddenly that's interrupted by this thought of, oh yeah, but in that meeting there's going to be this colleague of mine, and she's really brilliant and I really admire her, but I know sometimes we clash, and sometimes I kind of trigger her and she gets angry and upset, And if that happens in this meeting, it might go really wrong, like it did 3 months ago. When we had that other meeting, and she flared up, and then I got upset, and it was a disaster. What if that happens? Oh dear. So just in a few seconds, we've gone from next week to in 3 months' time, to maybe in 5 years' time, to 3 months ago, to next week again, and back and forth, and it's very quick, and it takes no special effort. And what's interesting about all of that is that we notice that there's usually emotion associated with these either future or past scenarios. So it's often connected with a feeling of anticipating either success or failure in the future. So maybe if we anticipate success, we kind of feel a little bit of pride, a little kind of rush of anticipation, exhilaration, and maybe if we remember a failure, this is kind of, you just cringe, you shrivel up inside. It feels like very painful, maybe kind of shame. I remember, I think as a teenager, I existed in a world of constantly thinking about what I had said or hadn't said, or and these kind of, those cringe moments. It just makes you go, oh, why did I do that? Oh. And maybe that's good. Maybe we learn like that. We go back and reflect about it and think, I will never do that again. Oh my God. If I'm ever in that situation again, I won't say that. That was stupid. So maybe we learn. But it's interesting to look at the quality of that experience. And we may notice that there's usually a quality of a kind of anxiety, worry, regret about the past, maybe fear about the future. So it's interesting, in the New York Times article, they were kind of praising this special ability that we have and saying, maybe we should make more time for it. Maybe we should each, cultivate this ability. Make sure that we have time in our day to let our minds wander. Because after all, right, that's our special human talent. So, we should make use of it. And they said, they were kind of said, unfortunately, there's a craze these days for mindfulness. And you got all these people telling us, just dwell in the present moment. Don't think about the past, don't think about the future. And in the article they were saying, wow, that's, we should be very careful. This is dangerous. So, I want to ask, is it true? Is it true that when we learn about mindfulness, that we are told not to think about the past or the future? Is it true that we're supposed to just, zone out and sit in the present moment and just ignore everything else? And is it true? That may be the perception about mindfulness, about meditation. And we often get the question. So when people first come in touch with the practice and they ask us, but can't I think about the future? I need to make plans. Can I never think about the past? So, this sutra is about this, exactly this. And Tai has collected a couple of different sutras, and he comments on a few different sutras that all relate to this topic. In one of the sutras there's a poem that the Buddha gave. And it seems like that poem pops up in many, many different sutras. It's kind of like it went viral. It's in those days. That's what going viral was. This one monk hears it. Wow, that's really cool. I'm going to tell all my friends. He goes and repeats it, and then the other monks and nuns hear it, and they share it, and the lay friends pick it up, and before you know it, it's in all these different sutras. So I'll read you the poem. Do not pursue the past. Do not lose yourself in the future. The past no longer is. The future has not yet come. Looking deeply at life as it is, in the very here and now, the practitioner dwells in stability and freedom. We must be diligent today. To wait until tomorrow is too late. Death comes unexpectedly. How can we bargain with it? The sage calls a person who knows how to dwell in mindfulness night and day, one who knows the better way to live alone. So why is it the better way to live alone? That's a little bit confusing. So in this little book, you might like to check it out, Our Appointment with Life. It's a very nice little book. These commentaries and sutras also appear in Awakening of the Heart. There's a collection of all the sutras and Thai's commentaries on them. But in this little book, Tai starts with another sutra called the Taranamo Sutta. It's the elder sutra. So it's about an elder monk. Maybe his name was the elder. Taranamo just means the one whose name is elder. And it seems like this monk really liked to live alone. And he may have been influenced by another teaching of the Buddha in which the Buddha praised another monk who spent a lot of time alone and seemed to... The Buddha was very satisfied, very happy with this other monk's practice. So he made a gatha about this other monk that kind of praised the way that this monk lived the solitary life. And so our monk, Mr. Mr. Elder Monk, he might have heard that and he was impressed, so he thought, well, I should live alone. And so he chose to live, he dwelled apart from the other monks. He went for alms alone. He ate alone. He did everything alone. He meditated alone. But somehow the other monks felt there's something a bit fishy about his practice. They weren't completely convinced. So they went to the Buddha and they said, well, there's this monk and he does everything alone, but it doesn't seem quite right. And the Buddha said, okay, let him, invite him to come and visit, and I will talk to him. So he comes to see the Buddha. And the Buddha asks him, is it true that you prefer to be alone? That you praise the life of solitude, you go for alms alone, come back from the village alone, and sit in meditation alone? And Terra replies, it is true. So then he goes on and I'll skip some of it, but the Buddha basically says to him, so that's fine, you live alone, that's good, but there's a better way to live alone. And he gives him another little poem. It goes like this. In observing life deeply, it is possible to see clearly all that is, not enslaved by anything. It is possible to put aside all craving. The result is a life of peace and joy. This is truly to live alone. So it seems as though the Buddha was making a kind of play on words. It seems as though what he was saying is, what's important is not being alone physically, but to make sure that we are not pursued by ghosts, by our desires, by our craving, by our thoughts about the past and the future. And I think it's interesting to look at our own experience and to see when we are dwelling with thoughts about the past or hopes and dreams about the future, we can ask ourselves, are we really alone? In those moments, for me at least, it seems like there's a lot of different voices. It's like cobwebs all around me. It's not very peaceful. So the Buddha is inviting us to look again and see what it really means to be alone. And do we really need to isolate ourselves? Or is it actually more important to learn about our tendency to run to the past and the future? So there's another sutra in this collection, which in Pali is the Bhattacharata Sutra. And this is the one that Thai has translated, the sutra on knowing the better way to live alone. But it's been translated in lots of different ways. And it's not immediately obvious how Thai gets that title. So he explains Bada, Eka, Rata. It's 3 words. Eka in the middle is one. It can also mean alone. Rata means to enjoy or to appreciate. And Bada is like the ideal or the best. So in the commentary, Thai says that he looked at how this had been translated in the past, and he felt that the translators maybe had not understood exactly the meaning of the title. And then he just says, after much reflection, I realized that the better title would be the Sutra on knowing the better way to live alone. So I read that and I thought, I don't get it. I don't understand. So I thought, well, maybe I need to do some reflection as well and try to understand. How did Thai arrive at that? So Eka is one. And Rata is to enjoy. And Bada is the best, or the ideal. So I tried to I kind of experimented with a number of different translations. So it could be enjoying the best kind of oneness. Appreciating the best, the ideal oneness. And from there I could start to understand, okay, maybe appreciating is knowing how. Knowing the best kind of oneness. And there the Buddha is making a play on words, so one, being one, might not really mean being alone physically. It means maybe being at one with oneself, not being divided by our imagining, our dreaming, our regrets, our craving. Noticing that when we are imagining, dreaming, or regretting, we're not really one. We're kind of not really at peace. So the sutra is very, very nice. The Buddha starts with this Regatta that I read before. And he says, I will begin with an outline of the teaching and then I will give a detailed explanation. It's very, very nice pedagogy. So the Regatta, the little poem, is the outline, and then he goes into the detail. And here we can find out, is it true that the Buddha tells us only to think about the present moment, or only to be in the present moment and to ignore the past and the future? So in the detailed explanation there are 6 parts. And there's a kind of symmetry. So in each of the 6 parts, we go through a list of the 5 skandhas. So you may already be familiar with this way of describing what we are. So it's not meant to be a perfect description of reality, it's just one model, it's just one way of looking at ourselves. Body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, our thoughts, and consciousness. So it's just a picture to try to encompass our experience. And it's interesting to look and to see, is there anything that lies outside of those 5? I always like to try to find exceptions. And I've been looking for a long time, I never found anything. I can't get out of those 5. Body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. I don't know, maybe you can find something that doesn't fit in one of those, in your experience. I haven't found it yet. So then the Buddha continues, and he describes, what do we mean by pursuing the past? Because in the poem it says, do not pursue the past. So then the detail is, what do we mean by pursuing the past? And we go through the 5. When someone thinks about the way her body was in the past, the way her feelings were in the past, the way her perceptions were in the past, the way her mental formations were in the past, the way her consciousness was in the past. When she thinks about these things and her mind is burdened by and attached to these things which belong to the past, then that person is pursuing the past. Okay, remember we've got 6 sections, so that's the first. And then in the second, the Buddha says, well, what do we mean by not pursuing the past? And we go through the same 5 when you think about how your body was in the past, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness. But your mind is neither enslaved by nor attached to those things which belong to the past. Then that person is not pursuing the past. So that's very interesting. So the Buddha is giving us 2 ways to be with our past experience. So it's kind of like a test that we can apply. When we notice that we're thinking about the past, which happens, spontaneously, we can apply this test. Am I burdened by? Am I attached to this experience of the past? Or am I not burdened by it, not attached to it? So that's the only criterion. In any case, we're not trying to say anything about what's right and wrong. There's no right and wrong here. It's only, the point is to try to find out what makes us go in the direction of suffering and what helps us to go in the direction of peace, freedom, ease, joy, stability. So it's very interesting to try to apply that test. Whenever we notice that we're thinking about the past, we can ask ourselves, is this dragging me down? Am I drowning? Or am I able to contemplate the past in stability and freedom? And so we've kind of already answered the question. Right? The Buddha doesn't teach us not to think about the past. He's only helping us to find a better way to do it. A way that doesn't drag us down. And then, so we have the same thing with the future. Okay, he asks, what is meant by losing yourself in the future? And you go through the 5, body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations. When we are burdened by and daydreaming about these things which belong to the future, then we are losing ourselves in the future. And what is meant by not losing ourselves in the future? We go through the 5 again. And you guessed it, when we are not burdened by or daydreaming about those things which belong to the future, then we are not losing ourselves in the future. So it's quite straightforward, right? So far, so good. We just have a way to test. It's very practical, very applicable. And it has nothing to do with going off into the forest and being on our own. Right? It's just a way to get rid of the ghosts that chase us from the past. And, our fears and hopes from the future that haunt us. That's what it means to be alone, or to be at one. And maybe actually it's better to be together to do that. Maybe we need each other's support. And I think, a lot of us have myself included, I sometimes have a kind of fantasy about going off and being a hermit and living in a hut on my own and going really deep. But I know from experience that it's not easy. And the things that come up when I'm on my own might be difficult to handle. And maybe I'm not really strong enough to do it. I do better when I'm with my brothers and sisters. So that's just something that we can observe. Usually my brothers and sisters, they lift me up. They help me to be my better self. So we've talked about the past and the future. And so we kind of resolved the question already, right? The Buddha doesn't say, don't think about the past, don't think about the future. He just says, be careful how you do it. And be careful to check whether or not it's drowning you, whether or not it's sweeping you away. So we can already respond to our friend in the New York Times. Say, don't worry about mindfulness. Mindfulness is okay. We will not lose our special human ability to time travel. We will just do it better. Hopefully with a little bit less suffering. So maybe we can come up with an alternative title for this sutra. The better way to time travel. So it seems that we are encouraged to pay attention to our tendency to get caught by the past and get swept away by imagining the future. And we are encouraged to come back to the present moment. And that's based on the realization that the past and the future are available in the present moment. That these notions of past, present and future are just that. They're just notions. That we may not really know yet what the past or the future, or especially the present, what it really is. And there's, for me, a kind of invitation that I always feel from Thai to really taste the present moment. And I always try to maintain the attitude that I may not have ever really experienced the present moment. I don't assume that I know what it is. I want to maintain the attitude that when I walk, I'm fully with my step and my breath, that I might be surprised, that maybe I don't yet know really what it is to take a step in the present moment. I never want to imagine that I have that I've understood. Because the moment that I think that, the door shuts to life, to experience, to real life. And I just live in my notions, what I think I've understood. So I want to keep the door open, that maybe I have no idea really what the present moment is. And maybe there's a sense in which I never will, that there's something ungraspable about it. I'll never be able to explain it or completely say that now I've got it. And maybe that's okay, to leave it like that, unresolved, mysterious. There is a mystery at the heart of life. And if it's a real mystery, then it should stay a mystery. I don't want to try to resolve it. Because the moment I resolve it, I might limit it and make it very narrow. I might miss the truth. So the Buddha also teaches us about being in the present. And it's interesting because he teaches that it's also possible to be swept away by the present. So that's very interesting. Remember, there's 6 sections, okay? So we had what is being swept away by the past, what is not being swept away by the past, what is being swept away by the future, what is not being swept away by the future, and then what is being swept away by the present, and what is it to be not swept away by the present. So there's good news, because the first part of being swept away by the present, as long as we're sitting here, we got it down. We're okay. He says, being swept away by the present is when somebody does not study or learn anything about the awakened one, or the teachings of love and understanding, or the community that lives in harmony and awareness. When that person knows nothing about the noble teachers and their teachers and their teachings, does not practice these teachings. Okay, so far so good, right? We're all sitting here, we've at least heard about, some of these teachings, and we may be putting them into practice, so, okay, it's good. The next bit is more tricky. So when we're being swept away by the present, we think, to have the thought, this body is myself. I am this body. These feelings are myself. I am these feelings. This perception is myself. I am these perceptions. This mental formation is myself. I am this mental formation. This consciousness is myself. I am this consciousness. When we think like that, then we are being swept away by the present. Uh-oh. What is meant by not being swept away by the present? When somebody studies and learns about the awakened one, the teachings of love and understanding, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. I don't know if the Buddha really said this, honestly. I mean, it sounds a bit like marketing. Sorry, I mean, excuse me. I want to treat these texts with reverence, but also with a little dose of skepticism, because the likelihood that we as human beings could have preserved precisely what the Buddha said for 2,500 years, not sure. If you've ever played the game of Chinese whispers, it only takes a few minutes for something, once it's been repeated a few times, is totally different. So, yes, reverence, but I don't know. We need to apply our intelligence as well when we read the sutras. We don't assume that everything is exactly as it was when the Buddha taught. So then it goes on. Not being swept away by the present is when we do not think, this body is myself, I am this body, these feelings are myself, I am these feelings. When we do not think these perceptions are myself, I am these perceptions. These mental formations are myself, I am these mental formations. When we do not think, this consciousness is myself, I am this consciousness, then that person is not being swept away by the present. Very challenging. Mostly those thoughts of identification with the body, with the feelings, the perceptions, mental formations and consciousness are unconscious, automatic. It doesn't mean they're not there. And we need to examine our experience and check to see when are we making those automatic assumptions. And what would it mean not to do that? It's very interesting, the Buddha doesn't replace the 5 skandhas with anything else. He doesn't say, you don't think that your body is you, but you think it's something else, right? He doesn't replace it with anything. He just says, you don't think it's this, you don't think it's that, it's not that, it's not that. So where do you go? Tricky. Very tricky. So Thai is a little bit more compassionate. He gives us the possibility to connect. To see the ways in which we are not separate. We're not separate from our parents. They are in us. We're not separate from our teachers, our friends, our society. It helps us to see our connection with the whole of life, the evolution of life on this planet. Both in time and space. We depend on the entire ecosystem just to breathe. We can't do it alone. There are things that are very misleading, like having a name and a passport and an identity card. It's very misleading. It looks as if there's a thing separate, identifiable, with characteristics more or less kind of enduring in time. But it's very misleading. I think when we look more carefully, and that's what the Buddha is inviting us to do, just to look very carefully. When we look more carefully in the present moment, we can't find anything which is separate, which exists. There's only interconnection, interexistence. So, I want to share a little bit about how we handle our painful experiences. Because it seems that we do have pain, we do have suffering, there are wounds. And when we look at this special human ability that we have to time travel, we may notice that it often causes a lot of anxiety. And although potentially it might be a very good way to learn from our past experience and do better in the future, very often what we notice is that we tend to repeat patterns of suffering. We have habits. They're not always good ones. And even though we go back and we look at our past experience, sometimes we don't really learn. We actually reinforce our suffering. We repeat it. We rehearse it. I think that's what the Sutra is cautioning us about and helping us to find a better way to deal with our pain. As meditators, we are very lucky. I feel very lucky to have encountered a stream of practice and wisdom that allows me to touch peace. We have ways. We know how to sit, how to follow our breathing. We know how to walk in mindfulness. And we may have developed the ability to dwell in peace. Maybe even a kind of bliss. But it's not enough. If we're not careful, it may be that we are avoiding our pain. We use meditation as a way to avoid touching our suffering. This now is known as spiritual bypassing. We can get very good at spiritual bypassing. And it looks good. It looks very good from the outside. You look very peaceful. Wow. But we need to be careful. We know that that stopping, calming, relaxing, touching joy, stillness, peace, that is only one part of our practice. And we need to continue. We need to be courageous and allow our pain to be there. It will come up. It wants to come up. It wants to be seen and heard and embraced. And we can ignore it for a while. We can cover it up. We can meditate. We can, bliss out. There's all kinds of ways. Or we can just watch a movie, cover it up with chocolate. All kinds of ways. Even work. Even good works. We might be doing something very noble, but if we're so busy that we don't have time to feel our pain, then we may risk a kind of creating a blockage in the flow of energy. We learn from our teacher that being with our suffering, allowing our suffering to come up may be good for us. We may learn from being with our suffering. It's painful. We don't want to touch it. We don't want to feel it, but actually if we can and if we can stay with it, we may learn a lot from it. We may grow in compassion, in vulnerability, in our humanity. So we speak of looking deeply into our suffering. But there too we need to be careful. When are we looking deeply, and when are we nourishing our suffering, rehearsing our suffering, eating our suffering, ruminating on it? When our suffering comes up, something from the past, usually there's a story associated with it. And we all have our favorite flavor of suffering. It's like our favorite kind of ice cream. And we like it. There's a certain kind of we like to kind of wallow in it a little bit. I think for me it's probably injustice. Maybe victimhood. It's so unfair. Why did it happen to me like that? And we have to get to know our habit, our tendency, so that we can recognize it when it comes up. Aha, I know you. And we recognize our tendency to tell stories. This again is neuroscience. We learn that there's a part of our brain that loves to make up stories, especially when it doesn't understand. When our experience is difficult to grasp, difficult to understand, there's a part of our brain which instantly makes up stories. And it makes a lot of sense. It makes very good stories, very convincing, usually wrong. Incomplete, maybe oversimplified. And usually it's associated with language. So it's we make up stories using language, and language is it's a pale shadow of reality. So whatever we say, it cannot be the truth. It's always an oversimplification. So we need to be cautious about using language. Even just saying, I'm sad. Sad is like one note in music. It's sad, I'm sad. It doesn't change, but look at your experience. When you're in touch with that feeling, it's always changing, always moving. In time, in space, where is it in the body? In intensity, it's stronger, it's less strong. In quality, maybe it's dense, it's diffuse, it's heavy, it's cold, it's warm. It's always changing. So just to say sad, it's misleading. And we mislead ourselves by trusting language too much. So when our suffering comes up and it's related to a past experience, we probably already have a story about what happened. He said that to me. How dare he say that like that with those people? So unfair, and as long as we stay at the level of the story and we repeat We repeat, we kind of reinforce those neural pathways, we make it stronger, we convince ourselves how right we were and how unjust it was, and it gets stronger and stronger, and at least in my experience, there's no way out. We cannot resolve it at the level of the story. There's endless justifications and reasons and explications. It doesn't work. There's no way out. So I think we are invited to drop the story, to be with the feeling as a feeling. Sometimes we speak of the feeling in the feeling. So we become one with the feeling in the body. We can locate it in the body, feel it directly. And there is also a part of our brain which can do this, which can become one with the feeling as a feeling. But the story is very compelling and it comes back very quickly, maybe 100 times a minute. You know, we think, okay, drop the story, stay with the feeling. Yeah, but I can't believe he said that thing. It's very quick and very tricky. It will disguise itself. It will trick us. Before we know it, we're back at the level of the blah, 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 blah. Endless. No way out. So we need to train to let go of the story, the talking. Come back to the feeling again and again and again and again. And we train ourselves to dwell with the feeling, to stay with it continuously. It's very unpleasant. We don't want to do it. It doesn't feel good. We better get used to it. It doesn't feel good. It really doesn't feel good. It feels horrible. The last thing we want to do is stay with the feeling, because it's not a nice feeling. It's an unpleasant feeling. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to know. But that is the invitation, to train ourselves to stay with it, little by little, to approach, to get closer, to be able to dwell with that feeling continuously. And in doing so, the feeling is soothed. It can be calmed. And maybe it goes away, or it transforms into a feeling of peace or joy, but we may not have understood it yet. So there's a gradual process, maybe over years, over months, over weeks. We get to know ourselves. We get to know our pain. We become friends with it. We let it in. We open the door, say, please, come. I am here for you. You can stay as long as you want. I will listen to you. I will be with you. I will breathe with you. Now, painful experiences, especially if they happened in early childhood, often there's it's like a kind of mistrust. Our feelings don't really trust us because we've pushed them away so many times. Why would they trust us? And we need to re-establish that trust, that communication. Let them know that they can be there. And slowly they may reveal themselves. So when we speak about looking deeply, it's not thinking deeply, it's not reasoning, it's not explaining. For me, it's more like feeling deeply, with a total openness. Very often we don't really know what happened. We may have a story, it's probably not complete. It may be very oversimplified. And it may be from a very narrow point of view. If when we tell our stories, we only tell them from our own perspective, we may miss the truth, or we may miss the possibility of compassion. So we have to come to our pain with this sense that we don't really know it yet. We don't assume that we know it. We don't assume that we know what happened or why it was painful or unjust. Let us feel it directly. Allow it to be there without any expectation of it changing or going away. And then, perhaps, it's like taming a wild animal. Slowly, it feels more trust, and it will approach, and it will reveal itself. And then we may have insight, may suddenly understand. And from insight, we may be liberated from our suffering. So, I would like to end by offering you a chant. About a year ago, a little more than a year ago, some suffering from my own childhood came up very strong, and it was very difficult for me to be with it. It was very painful, very unexpected, and so I needed to find ways to stay in touch with the present moment, to stay anchored in the present moment, to have a good foundation to be able to allow my pain to be there. And I think it's always good to have some kind of emergency measures. Because we know that some suffering is very strong. It may be from our own lifetimes, it may be from our parents, from our people, may have been transmitted for a long time. We are very lucky to have encountered a stream of practice, a kind of wisdom that gives us the possibility to be with it. So for me, one of those kind of emergency, it's like an emergency eject, the suffering is too strong, you got to pull the ejector seat handle, you're going to crash and burn, you're going to drown, so just eject, open the parachute. And for me, sometimes it's just as simple as taking the chanting book and opening it at random, just read something. Water the positive seeds. I know that wherever I open the chanting book, whatever I read, it will water the positive seeds. Guaranteed. So I kind of developed that practice, and sometimes I would take a text and just kind of chant it, just improvise something to be able to remember it. And this is a chant that became a very good friend. Last year, in the end, it became a kind of daily companion. I would chant it every day. And it was like the rope that I could hold on to, that I knew if I hold on to this, it will lead me back to the present moment. I won't drown as long as I hold on to this. So I'd like to offer it to you. And it's kind of related to the Regatta in the Sutra. I have another friend with me who's going to help. The past has already gone, and the future is not yet here. Let us not drown ourselves in regret for what has passed, or in hopes and fears for what is yet to come. The Buddha has shown us that we can be peaceful, happy, and free in this very moment. Let us recall the Buddha's words and release all sadness and anxiety. Let us come back to ourselves, well established in the here and now. Let us learn to recognize the conditions for happiness present within us and around us. Can we hear the birds singing and the wind in the pines? Can we see the green mountains, the white clouds, and the golden moon? The Pure Land is available in this very moment. Every day we can enjoy the Buddha land. Every mindful step and breath takes us to the kingdom, revealing the wonders of the Dharmakaya. I am determined to let go of running, striving, busyness and despair. I run after fame, power, riches, or sensual pleasures, because I know that these do not lead to true happiness, but only bring me misery and misfortune. I shall learn to live simply, so I can live deeply every moment of my life, and body and mind can heal, and so I have the time to care for and protect those I have sworn to love. I shall practice for my mind to grow in love and compassion, so that I can help beings anywhere who are drowning in craving. I ask all Buddhas throughout space and time to protect and guide me, to support me on my path, so I can live in peace, joy and freedom, fulfilling the deepest aspiration as your disciple whom you trust.